$1,000 to $10,000, and you're talking point of use, which is like only $100 or $200. And so, like, not only is the capital cost very expensive, it's also the maintenance cost is very expensive. It can be thousands of dollars a year, and then it might be very technical. Like a normal homeowner, like if they don't have the proper training, they may not be able to do it. So I know that like some companies, they offer the option of, having it under a lease agreement, so somebody would service it. Um, and then another thing is, like, as far as I know, I don't think there's point of entry for nitrates. Like, I checked the certification lists in California, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bart, but not that I haven't seen any.
Right, yeah, point of entry for nitrate, we don't have any certified systems as yet. Culligan, I think, has one for maybe arsenic for point of entry. I mean, the idea of treating all the water going into a house is a better idea, but remains to be seen if someone can make that work with the brine problems and so on. And it is allowed as a permanent solution in California.
And just one follow-up to what Shen has brought up. In California, as part of the permanent solution, even if you do a point of entry, the full operating and maintenance is the full responsibility of the public water system. So the homeowners won't be doing any of the filter changes. They won't be doing any of the maintenance. So that's one of the key requirements under the Safe Drinking Water Act, that if you do propose an approach for POU or POE as both interim and permanent solution, the full responsibility is the maintenance not done by professionals, and the only sole responsibility for the homeowner is just to call when the light comes on.
My name is Horacio Mezquita, and I represent the small community of San Gerardo and Salinas. We experienced the contamination of nitrates and trichloropropane, and we also had a filtration system for cleaning up the water, and we wait 10 years to get a new well. And the community members suffer a lot. They have rashes, they lost their hair, their eyes were so red. It was a big problem. And just the lady on the water board that was asking how you gonna get this problem fixed. I think the California people, the people of California, we need to recover lots of money to fix this problem. And it has to come from any source, either the agriculture industry, the consumers, because the agriculture industry, they produce food for everybody, and we consume the food. So we have to find a way of bringing lots of money to fix this problem, because a lot of people are getting hurt, and it's going to be a major problem in the future, not only for the people, but for the environment, and also the water is increasingly getting contaminated. So we have to be careful with this, and this problem belongs to everybody, not just for disadvantaged communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Andrew Schmallenbach from UC Davis, and I understand that point of use treatment systems might not be necessarily a long-term solution for public water systems, but being that in the Munson situation, all the homes were on private wells, are they under any sort of regulatory pressure to find something else?
The Safe Drinking Water Act does not apply to water systems below 15 service connection or 25 people more than 60 days a year. So in the case of Munson, it's either categorized, this is all individual private homes, so definitely they're not required in any way under regulations to comply.
Okay, I have a web question. What is the length of time considered acceptable under the California regulation for point of use treatment for a public water system? Britta Renfro.
Under the point of use, point of entry regulations that were recently adopted, for point of use devices, the maximum, so we give them time to first install the unit, to pilot it to make sure it works. After successful demonstration, then they can roll it out to all the water systems, all the individual homes. And the time limit is 3 years, but during that time, the goal is for them to install permanent solution. But if during that time that they couldn't achieve that, we can come back and revisit the issue and perhaps extend that time period. But the goal is for them to install a permanent solution within that 3-year period.
Thank you, Eugene. Got it? Thank you.
Thanks. One more time. Paul Blair, Self-Help. I realize that with nitrates, the concern is ingestion, and so that point of use definitely takes care of that when you go to the sink. But for other contaminants like arsenic or volatile organics, is there any recommendation for where maybe point of entry may make more sense if you're concerned about absorption through your skin or inhalation when you're taking a shower?
There are specific prohibitions for what type of contaminants you can use a point of use device. And so, for example, of what you have brought up for organics, especially volatile organics, you cannot propose even a point of use as an interim measure, because when you shower, you're volatilize and you'll inhale it, so that doesn't solve your problem. So for the point of use devices, it's intended for arsenic, nitrate, things that don't volatilize. So that's what's being done. In the case of if you do have a volatile, perhaps they can do a point of entry GAC filter type where they can absorb the 123 TCP or something that is amenable to it. And in that type of a point of entry device, you can determine based on piloting, maybe running a filter all the time to figure out when it gets exhausted, so that they can send a specific alarm based on the volume treated. So all water in the house from shower to cooking, you have removed the organics. But so that will be one way to do it. And then but the spent GAC will need to be properly reactivated, and we don't have the infrastructure for that right now.
Chad Seidel with Jacobs. I just wanted to follow up on Fran's question and a broader question about how to engage the broader community to solve these issues. So sharing some experience from other states that have addressed similar issues. My perspective is that the most successful outcomes in addressing these types of issues where there are a number of small communities impacted by a given water quality concern are usually initiated by the state in basically leveraging all the interested stakeholders in California. That would obviously be the folks represented here with the state and regional board and DPH, but engaging the right technical expertise to do the initial assessments of what are the best alternatives and the most cost-effective alternatives to address those things. You know, the SBX1 effort, I think, was a good start in that direction. It gave some options and ideas of what might be the best alternatives and the total costs of those things. Once you have a better sense of what those costs are, you can actually start getting to work of funding those things. State of Colorado, for example, in the last 10 years had 2 similar efforts along those lines. They named them with cute little acronyms. COSTAR was regarding arsenic compliance challenges for small systems. They had about 25 systems that they anticipated that were going to be out of compliance with the arsenic rule when it was implemented. And even before that compliance timeframe came, they had the State Department of Public Health and Environment, and they contracted technical expertise outside to do assessments of what treatment and or centralization or regionalization approaches would be best implemented and be the most cost effective. Comparing that with some of the experiences for small systems that kind of had to go at their own in California in the last 5-10 years for arsenic compliance, I think a coordinated effort up front would have precluded some of those efforts that unfortunately took time and money away from an ultimate solution that would have been sustainable and actually achieve those objectives. They did a similar one, which actually probably more along the lines of the nitrate issues for CORADs. There's a whole valley in southeastern Colorado that's impacted by radium and other radionuclides, and that is pushing a massive regionalization effort to provide water to dozens of communities with roughly a 100-mile pipeline. And so when we think that we need to, that it might be too much for us to cast a net of a mile away from a large water system, let's not limit our thinking to what we can do to actually solve these problems on a broader basis, because you're right. I mean, the economic benefits that we as a society get from these areas are tremendous, and we need to pull them into that broader part of society. But then to speak out to the points about those communities that are not public water systems, there is a fast growing segment of the drinking water community that's focused on assisting developing communities. And that's typically outside the U.S. And I and a few others, and there's probably others in this room, that are trying to get the attention of those groups to not focus their time overseas. Not that that's a bad thing, there certainly needs there, but there are lots of great examples of how those communities could be well served here locally. And so if we can help tie those communities in need locally with those groups that want to provide that technical expertise, we can get more technical expertise and funding capabilities to those. You know, that whole WASH sector internationally is focused on addressing these types of issues, and they have good experience with what works and what doesn't work. You know, I certainly applaud the efforts in Munson, for example, but there's the reality that in 5 to 10 years, that particular unit of under-sink system might not be available anymore, and then what do? Do you go through the same effort of replacing it again? And there's lots of good international experience about how those things have been more versus less successful, and totally agree that it starts with the community engagement in knowing about the problem and being willing to try to solve the problem. And then not stopping short of really solving the problem because of the hurdles that inevitably come up, funding, bureaucracy, whatever the case might be. And so glad that y'all are having this conversation today, because it's certainly a solvable problem. These are not insurmountable challenges, and hopefully 5 years from now we can have a recap that shows that these issues are more a thing of the past than of the present.
Matthew Keeling, Central Coast Water Board. One of the biggest obstacles that we face in the Central Coast region, and I don't think this is unique across the state, you know, in trying to address this issue, we still don't know where all these communities are. You know, we're talking about these unregulated water systems and domestic wells below the public water system threshold. You know, the reason that we know about the communities of Munson and San Gerardo and others that we've talked about is because those ones have been identified. So before we can really do a good evaluation of what the solutions are to address these communities, we need to know how many they are, you know, where are they, what are the water quality problems they're trying to address. So on a statewide basis, when you look at this, it may not seem that significant because, you know, 95% of the population is served by public water systems. If you start to look at a county by county analysis of the percentage of the population that is not served by a public water system, it looks drastically different. Monterey County, for example, about 40% of the population gets their water from sources other than public water systems, and they're mostly domestic wells and unregulated water systems. So when we see similar demographics throughout our region, and I don't think that's unique to other parts of California. So I think we really need to focus our efforts on a statewide analysis of where these communities are and what their needs are, and then we can really start talking about what the viable solutions are.
How are you? Omar Carrillo, Community Water Center. So a couple things came to mind. We definitely, through the work that we do, Community Water Center, you know, Shin did a fantastic job presenting one of the efforts that we're involved in, very localized effort. We work on policy issues. We also work with the community very closely. And some of the things to highlight is I think that from being part of the presentations yesterday or listening to them, some of the projects seem to be the scale of which are pretty big. We need to think a little bit smaller. So when we're talking about the communities that we're dealing with, such as, you know, we're talking about 48 residential units, 118 individuals, we need to think on that scale. So especially since you have the creative thinkers in this room, how do we do that? There definitely needs to be more, we definitely believe, from the state. The state has to do a better job in targeting the funding to these communities, and we have taken steps forward. This is a great step forward, but, you know, we have to be very straight up in the fact that we definitely know that there's communities that, like Horacio was saying, they had to wait 10 years to receive funding, to receive the fix that they ultimately got. There's hundreds of communities that are in that current situation. So in thinking about what the state can do, targeting the funding that's available through the SRF, funding that's available through the State Water Board, specifically the discussions and conversations around the state water bond, what kind of funding can actually be targeted to the smalls, the state smalls, so 15 and under, and also developing technology. That's what we're in the room here for. So, actually I learned quite a bit about the termination of the companies that are here and the technology, and I definitely think that we'll be taking this back, and we look forward to working with you and hearing from you as to the technologies that can be focused on the scale of the communities that we work with, and we think it will be a win-win. So thank you very much.
Okay. Other questions? This dialogue has been really good. More food for thought before lunch? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your rapt attention this morning. We will resume, according to the schedule, it says 1:15. I'm going to get you back here at 1:10 because I know you'll be late. So 1:10, please. Thank you.